tell us about the complexity of building a legitimate attack plan. You're about to go invade a country. What's going through your mind? What rank were you at the time? And did you feel like you were ready for that kind of thing?
Yeah, I had on 9/11, I was a reserve company commander, coming to the end of my reserve time, and Alpha Company 4th LAR. I hope that you got some listeners out there that were in that unit, and we had the most amazing group of staff NCOs. And in fact, the only reason I'm sitting here today, a guy named Phil Mathias and Steve Craig and Evan Guevara and Dennis Daly and on. They were just phenomenal. I'd been in the company, some of them for 10 years. And so they knew, they just knew, they knew their craft. We're all reservists. We all have, other jobs and lives, but we took it very seriously. We took before 9/11, we took our unit and our drill weekends very seriously. And because I had these kind of like senseis that were in my unit, we would actually meet between drills. We would go to places like Big Bear and other places and look around for training areas and say, what if we tried this? And what if we tried that? And that summer we got the golden ticket to do what's called an extended annual training in Australia. So we took the company to Australia, and we got attached to the Australians' 2 Cav Regiment. And we worked for this guy named Mick Krause, who was the closest thing to being jumped into Hell's Angels I could ever imagine. And we did some crazy stuff in the Shoalwater Bay training area. We're getting chased around by Australian tanks, and we're firing the Bushmaster chain gun, in the trees. We're going through trees, bushwhacking, firing it was crazy. And we all came out of there supremely confident. And I remember one of them, I think we stopped at Pearl Harbor on the way back. One of them actually said, this is late August 2001, said something like, hey, it's too bad we didn't get a chance to go to war together, because, I was about to change command and other people were about to leave. I remember somebody said that, and it wasn't weird. Because, when you're on the team and you're practicing all the time, it was like, hey, you want to play the game.
Yeah,
it sounds awful. That's reality. And so I knew my craft very well. So when 9/11 happened, in very short order, they pulled me into the battalion and said, you're going to be the OPSO when we go to war. And we didn't get mobilized until about a year later. So I had a year, to get my act together. And so by the time I went home for Christmas, I had, not home, I lived in San Diego, but I had a wife and young children, and I have a family back in St. Louis. And so I called my battalion commander at the Christmas of 2002, I guess, and said, hey, I'm flying back to St. Louis. Is there any reason I shouldn't go? Are we good? I'm going to go have Christmas with my extended family. He goes, no, go ahead. We're fine. I get there on like December 26th. I get a phone call. Come back immediately. You and pick 2 more Marines are going to fly out to the East Coast. There's an amphibious task force forming off the East Coast. You're going to fly out to the ships, embark, and go over with them, and we're going to get strat lifted over and meet you in Kuwait. Holy shit, Yeah. So I picked the Camo, who I didn't know. He was brand new. Because I figured, boy, if they're going to meet us in stride and we're crossing the line of departure, we better have our comm tight, because we're going to be out front. We got to be able. And I picked the fire sport coordinator, because I thought we better know what the fire sport coordination measures are, again, because we're going to be in and out of friendly lines, and want to make sure we understand what the measures were. So the 3 of us flew to Camp Lejeune, got on a helicopter, CH-53, flew out to the USS Bataan and floated over, and that took a month. And so, we're immersed in this every day. But long story short, by the time we crossed the line of departure, for the conventional part of the attack, I was I don't remember being nervous about knowing my job or not, because it was so much. It's like being the offensive coordinator in the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? You're so into it. You're running through the plays constantly that it just unfolds that way. When it switched to an insurgency, we got caught in southern Baghdad, like when it really changed. And that was an entirely different game. And we got converted into this task force with force recon and some ODAs and some EOD. And we were in these towns called Mahmudiya, Latafiya, and Yusufia in the summer of 2003. And that was a completely different game. And that was more like sandlot football.
Yeah. I guess that's as much as I hate being on ship, that's not a bad environment to be in if that's where you're headed. If you know you're heading to war, like you're completely immersed in the military. You can easily walk over to a supercomputer and pull stuff up if you need to. Like, as miserable as ship life is, that's not a bad spot to be if you're planning for something like that.
Yeah. The only thing Yeah. The only thing
Oh,
about that, we were at surge berthing. So you know what that is. I mean, we were there. You can't even move on the ship. And then we got our anthrax shots on the ship. So
mm,
you're in surge berthing and you're rubbing it. It's just, it was, so it was, but it was like you said. I think what you're talking about is you were very isolated. You're getting your head and your heart right, and you're getting yourself ready to do what has to be done. You're not, you know, like a volunteer fireman driving to a fire, worrying about who's going to pick up the kid. All that stuff's gone now.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're not nothing back home as if it's not like you can just call home. And this
You
was
can't.
what year?
2003,
2003.
like January, I think 2003. So there was no cell phone. You
I
weren't
imagine there
none of
was no
that.
internet on ship either. Or if there
No,
was, very limited.
very limited, very
So
limited.
I don't think I've had anyone talk about Fourth LAR's role within OIF one. Where were
Yeah.
you? Who were you guys attached to? Like what task force, and what was the
So
role?
some companies got divided out to active duty regiments,
Hmm.
and they were attached to like Bravo Company was attached to, I want to say, Third LAR, but they were chopped up. The battalion itself, so I got sent over with that small group, and we got assigned to Second Marines, and the theory was that the battalion headquarters and the remaining companies were going to be flown over and meet us in Kuwait, and we're all going to go up as part of Second Marines Task Force Tarawa. But when the 101st Airborne got turned around by Turkey, Turkey wouldn't let them come through to attack
Yeah.
from the north. All the Strat Air got sucked up, and so in an instant, like Fourth LAR evaporated. It wasn't in the game. So
Mm.
I actually crossed the line of departure and went into the Battle of Nasiriyah with the regimental trains. I was the navigator for the combat trains for Second Marines. That's basically my goal. I was helping navigate, and then EPW, early EPW, because it was just kind of loose, kind of help with that for Second Marines. And then right when we got through Nasiriyah, something had changed, and Fourth LAR moved back up into priority for Strat Lift, and all of a sudden they found me like on the road to Al Qut and said, "Hey, Fourth LAR is landing in Kuwait right now. You need to go back and bring them forward." So I can't even remember how it happened, but a CH-46 lands like on a highway. I jump in with these other two Marines, and we fly back to a place, near the Kuwaiti border, and we had a SATCOM, early SATCOM, and we got on and raised them, and we had a link up, and they came by. We jumped in like hitchhikers and drove north to Al Qut, and then ended up on the Iranian. Then we drove almost straight to the Iranian border. I know we were in Al Qut airfield for a little bit. Then we got pushed up to the Iranian border, which was crazy because the Iranians saw us, and doctrinally, of course, they study us. And what do they think when they see us?
Mm-hmm.
They think there's going to be a division attack because we're the forward element.
Yeah.
So they start pushing all this shit down to the border, and we're there facing off, and it was nuts. It was crazy, yeah.
Is it weird to look back on those times and just be like, man, like especially now, like what you're doing now, more high level stuff, you're just like, man, what was I doing back in the day?
Oh yeah. Well, again, I had such confidence in the Marines that I had gotten to know there that it was like playing a fast break, Justin. You just, when you're on a good team, you know what I mean? You're on a good team, and okay, well now we're going here. Okay, now we're going there. And it was so busy that it wasn't like there was a lot of contemplation about how crazy is this, except at night, like when you're looking at your thermals and you're seeing BMPs come down to the border on the other side, you're like, okay, this is crazy. So we ended up, long story short, we ended up parlaying with the Iranians, and that's a whole nother thing. But where it got really nuts is when we got moved into this counterinsurgency piece. The rest of the entire MEF, we got moved down to Al Hilla, which is Babylon, and the rest of the MEF was basically out in town buying bread and putting windows in girls' schools and stuff. It was a different war. And we're up there. We got sent up into southern, the area of kind of south of Baghdad and southeast of Fallujah, in this place later, the 101st Airborne called the Triangle of Death. And we started getting in contact like every night. And we're doing raids every night. And it was a totally different war in this little pocket. And the first time enemies had found an IED in the MEF zone, and we found these IEDs started popping up, and we start, shooting these guys in black tracksuits who were working in teams, and it was. And I'm sending reports back saying, "Hey, this is organized. This is not tribal. This is organized." And we actually hit a target one night, and came out with, it is crazy. We came out with like U.S. Special Forces, like Green Beret literature about how to organize cells, the stuff they would have given in Eastern Europe in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, hey, this is, and the weapons caches, the stuff they were taking, were clearly, they were shopping, like you go to Trader Joe's and you're shopping for specific things. So we're sending these reports like, this is organized, and they're getting better. And then a guy named Brigadier General, so we were working for General Mattis at the time. And then a guy named Brigadier General John Kelly, later General Kelly, later Chief of Staff of the White House Kelly, took real interest. He was a 1-star at the time. He started coming up. We're like, hey, sir, look, this is what's happening up here. And it was the front end of the insurgency, and we were brushing up against Fallujah and doing all these different patrols and stuff. And that's how I ended up on my second tour. Was I went home, and First Marine Division got alerted to go back, and I got a phone call. Like, when you're in the reserves, you're like kind of in the fantasy football draft. And I got a phone call from a couple colonels that I had got to know. One was John Toulon. He was 1st Marine Regiment, and the other was a guy named Joe Dunford, who later became Commandant and Chairman. And like, hey, we kind of want you to come back. You were up in this space. We're going to that space. Can you come? And I thought, well, shit, I'm going to be a watch officer, assistant watch officer. Sure. Let me talk to my wife. And I ended up as the intelligence officer for that unit going back. And that was a whole nother gig,
Yeah, especially, that's kind of odd, right? Coming out as a, one, you have a law background, and then you become an infantry officer, and then now you're going to go do intel work, which I guess as an intel officer, or excuse me, as an infantry officer, you have a pretty good handle on intel anyways, like you should at least, understanding intel and stuff like that. You may not have full, like, understanding of collections and things like that, but I mean, there's worse MOSs, I think, to push into an infantry or intel officer spot.
Yeah, I matured a lot in my first combat deployment to Iraq, because I was the guy, right before we went, was, hey, we don't need the intelligence officer in the vehicle, because we can get I literally said this, we can get our weather reports off the shortwave radio, off the,
pull up the BBC.
And then later on, it's like, you become. But what happened, like it has happened for me at every step of the way, I ran into exceptional professionals. And then, when I got orders to go back as an intel officer, my buddy, who was one of my platoon commanders when I was a company commander, gave me this little red pamphlet. And you remember those waterproof bags that used to be in your gas mask? Mm-hmm. It was folded up in that, and it was a World War II intel pub. You can almost like hear the ice cubes clinking in the glasses of these two, probably Walt Disney executives that got demobilized and were writing about what they learned. And the gist of it, Justin, was I'm flying over was, hey, don't trust any reports you get. Go talk to the soldiers, go talk to the Marines. So that's what I did. Initially, I would listen to all these intercepts from Radbin and all these other things. And then I would literally go out into the city or into the battalions. And, I remember like crawling into a machine gun position one night saying, hey, I'm about to brief my bosses, and this is what I'm going to tell them. What do you guys think? And they would tell me, oh, sir, that's a bunch of bullshit, or, oh, yeah, that's pretty good. And I knew Marines. I had a first sergeant in 3.5 was a squad leader when I was in 2.7. I said, hey, first sergeant, I really need to talk to some sharp Marines, because I'm going to go brief, and I want to make sure that, what I'm saying represents what they believe, and vice versa. So he got me in. I talked to some snipers one night in their hide and told them what I thought. And then next thing you know, I started getting invited to come. Hey, you should go talk to this guy. Because when I'm there, I'm giving the Marines the brief. I'm telling these sergeants and corporals that what I think is happening in the bigger picture. And they liked it. So I got great access throughout the regimental combat team. And that really helped me become an intelligence officer. And then, of course, every agency showed up under the sun. Delta Force showed up. Not Delta. They're not called Delta Force, but those guys showed up. CIA showed up. NGA showed up, and I got a master's class in being an intelligence officer.
Yeah, I think something you said there that they appreciated hearing those intel briefs is huge, because I think that's one thing that a lot of Marines really just don't like. Is it's like, man, I'm operating in a vacuum here. I don't even know what we're doing. What's the mission? Why am I doing this? Like. And maybe that's my own personality, but I was always a why guy. Like, why are we doing this? Does that make sense? Like, does this make sense that we're doing this? And obviously, Lance Corporal Kramer's not asking sergeants why; he's just doing it. But it's nice every once in a while when they give you, maybe they don't tell you right in that moment of when you're doing something, but give you some kind of feedback, so I understand. Like, oh, okay, now I kind of understand the bigger picture. Because not only are you keying me in on what's going on, But now that my understanding of everything is a little bit broader, maybe I have something to give back to the conversation, or maybe, some feedback up.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. I would call it like priming the pump. I'd say, hey, this is what we think. This is what I'm going to brief. And and I would give them that. And the next time I would come around, first of all, they were paying attention in the interim, and they were ready to tell me something. Hey, sir, and most times it was good, sometimes it was crazy, but the whole point was it was an active dialogue going back and forth, and that's probably the reason I didn't get fired in that job, is that I had a perspective that other folks might not have had, because I was talking to the Marines.
What was the vibe of the intelligence at the time before, right? Like leading up to the first attack on Fallujah? Obviously, for the people that don't know, maybe, there was some contractors that got caught up in the city and ended up being hung from a bridge and burned. They were dragged, and it was horrible. The images are still out there. They're obviously horrific. And that's when like the first attack happened. But obviously that was just a match that set everything off. What was like the vibe at the time that led up to that event?
So we got sent over, and the irony is, when I